Dr. Eleanor Reeves couldn't stop staring at the readouts. The quantum field stabilizers were showing numbers that shouldn't have been possible. The stream of data flooding her monitors defied every known law of physics. And yet, there it was. "Theo, are you seeing this?" she called out, not taking her eyes off the screen to Doctor. Theodore Kim glanced up from his own station across the cavernous laboratory. The Quantum Bridge Project's main facility hummed with the sound of cooling systems and the low thrum of particle accelerators buried deep beneath them. If you're referring to the impossible data suggesting our containment field just generated 16 dimensions instead of the targeted 4. Theo's voice trailed off as he abandoned his workstation and moved to stand beside Eleanor. "Then yes, I'm seeing it. We need to shut it down," Eleanor said, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. The QBP had been her life's work. 7 years of theoretical calculations, prototype development, and finally this. An attempt to create a stable Einstein-Rosen bridge, a traversable wormhole between 2 points in space-time. But not if it meant risking a catastrophic breach. Eleanor's dark hair fell across her face as she hunched over the terminal. At 42, she'd earned every one of the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Battle scars from endless nights spent solving equations that most physicists considered unsolvable. "Wait," Theo said, placing a hand on her arm. "The field is stabilizing." He was right. The readings were settling, coalescing around values that were certainly abnormal, but no longer fluctuating wildly. The artificial wormhole they generated in the center of the chamber, a sphere of utter darkness surrounded by a corona of blue-white energy, had stopped its violent pulsations. "What the hell just happened?" Eleanor whispered. The laboratory doors burst open as Dr. Amara Okafor rushed in, tablet in hand, her expression a mixture of alarm and excitement. As the project's senior quantum engineer, Amara had designed most of the hardware that powered their experiments. "The sensors in the lower levels just went haywire," she announced, slightly out of breath. "And I'm picking up gravitational anomalies throughout the facility." Eleanor pointed to the darkened sphere. "The bridge is stabilizing, but those readings, they don't make sense," Theo finished for her. "Actually," Amara said, stepping forward to study the monitors, "they do make sense if—" She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. "Oh my God, what?" Eleanor and Theo asked in unison. "We didn't create a bridge between 2 points in our space-time," Amara said slowly. "These readings, they are consistent with a connection to an entirely different brain of reality, a parallel universe." Theo's voice was barely audible. "Theoretically possible, but we weren't even remotely targeting that," Eleanor said, shaking her head. "The power requirements alone would be astronomical," Amara agreed. And yet, the 3 scientists stood in silence, staring at the sphere of darkness. After years of work, countless failures, and nearly losing their funding twice, they'd accomplished something. Just not what they'd set out to do. "We need to send a probe through," Eleanor said finally. Theo looked at her sharply. "That wasn't in today's protocol. Neither was opening a doorway to another universe," she countered. "But the bridge is stable, and we need to collect data before it collapses." "She's right," Amara said. "This is unprecedented. If we don't gather information now, we might never replicate these conditions." Theo hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Prep the type. 3 probe. Full sensor array, maximum data storage." Within minutes, they had positioned the sleek, cylinder-shaped probe before the dark sphere. The remote control device, about the size of a small suitcase, was the most advanced piece of exploratory equipment the project had developed. "Telemetry is live," Amara confirmed from her station. "All systems nominal. Recording all channels," Theo added. Eleanor took a deep breath. "Initiating probe, transit in 3, 2, 1. She pressed the command key. The probe glided forward on its silent magnetic propulsion system and touched the darkness. For a heart-stopping moment, Nothing happened. Then the probe seemed to stretch impossibly before vanishing into the blackness. Connection maintained, Amara announced. Receiving data. Images began to appear on the main display. A landscape bathed in alien sunlight. The scene looked eerily familiar. Rolling hills covered in dense vegetation, a sky of striking blue. Almost like Earth, but where are the buildings? Theo asked, voicing what they were all thinking. The probe's coordinates should put it somewhere in the middle of Cambridge. Their laboratory was located beneath MIT's campus, the product of a joint venture between the university and a coalition of private research institutions. But the images showed no sign of human habitation, just wilderness. Air composition analysis coming in, Amara reported. Nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%, trace gases. She paused. The atmosphere is breathable, almost identical to ours, but with significantly lower carbon dioxide levels and no detectable industrial pollutants. Temperature 74 degrees Fahrenheit, barometric pressure consistent with Earth at sea level. Theo read off his screen. It's like Earth without people. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. Pan the camera. Let's get a 360-degree view. The image rotated, revealing more of the same pristine wilderness. No roads, no structures, no sign of human intervention in the landscape. I think, Eleanor said slowly, we may have found a parallel Earth where humans never evolved, or perhaps never came to exist at all. That's profound, Theo murmured. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the lab. The sphere of darkness began to pulse erratically. The bridge is destabilizing. Amara shouted over the noise. Energy fluctuations are off the charts. Recall the probe. Eleanor ordered, but it was too late. The displays showing the feed from the other side flickered and died, and the sphere expanded violently, the corona of energy around it flaring bright enough to momentarily blind them. Eleanor threw an arm across her eyes. When she lowered it, what she saw made her heart skip. The sphere had tripled in size. The darkness now stretched nearly 15 feet across, and small objects around the lab, pens, papers, a coffee mug, were being drawn toward it. It's collapsing into a singularity, Theo said, horror in his voice. The gravitational pull is increasing exponentially. Emergency shutdown. Eleanor shouted. Cut all power to the accelerators. Amara was already working frantically at her station. The automated systems aren't responding. I'm trying to override. The pull of the expanding sphere grew stronger. A chair skidded across the floor and disappeared into the darkness. Warning klaxons continued to sound throughout the facility. Manual override in the accelerator chamber, Eleanor said. It's the only way. Theo grabbed her arm. Eleanor, no. The radiation level's down there. We have no choice. She pulled away from him. This thing could take out half the city if it continues to grow. I designed a fail-safes. I know exactly what to do. Before either of her colleagues could stop her, Eleanor sprinted for the service elevator that would take her down to the accelerator level. The doors closed on Theo's shout of protest. As the elevator descended, Eleanor tried to calm her racing thoughts. The project had emergency protocols for nearly every conceivable disaster, except, apparently, accidentally opening a portal to another universe. She needed to shut down the particle accelerators that powered the quantum bridge, and she needed to do it immediately. The elevator came to a stop, and the doors opened onto a long, curving corridor that followed the circular path of the accelerator ring. Emergency lights pulsed red, casting an apocalyptic glow over everything. Eleanor ran toward the main control junction, only to skid to a halt as she rounded a bend. The corridor ahead was wrong. It seemed to twist impossibly, as if the very fabric of space was being distorted. And beyond the distortion, she caught glimpses of something else: green vegetation, blue sky. The other side was bleeding through. Oh God, she whispered. Her comm unit crackled. Eleanor. It was Theo's voice, nearly drowned out by static. The breach is expanding through the facility. Multiple rupture points are forming. I can see that, she replied grimly. I'm going to have to take a detour to reach the junction. She backtracked and took a different corridor, racing against time. The facility shuddered around her, the concrete walls groaning under forces they were never designed to withstand. When she finally reached the junction, she found it intact, but the distortion was visible here too, reality rippling like heat waves off hot asphalt. Eleanor forced herself to focus, accessing the manual override controls. Amara, Theo, she called over the comm. I'm at the junction. Initiating emergency shutdown sequence. Hurry, came Amara's voice. The main breach is still expanding. Eleanor's fingers flew over the control panel, inputting the complex series of commands that would safely power down the accelerators. The system fought her, error messages flashing across the screen. Come on, she muttered. Come on. With a final override code, the system relented. The deep humming that had been ever present in the facility began to wind down. The lights flickered. Power to the accelerators is dropping, Theo confirmed over the comm, but the breach, it's not closing. That's impossible, Eleanor said. Without the energy input, it should collapse immediately. Well, it's not, Amara cut in. In fact, it's… Oh no, what? Eleanor demanded. It's changing. The dark sphere is becoming transparent. I can see through to the other side, and something's coming through. Eleanor's blood ran cold. I'm coming back up. Try to evacuate the building. She ran for the elevator, but halfway there another violent shudder ran through the facility, strong enough to throw her against the wall. A crack formed in the floor, spreading rapidly toward her. Eleanor tried to scramble away, but the floor beneath her simply disappeared. She fell, a scream torn from her throat as darkness engulfed her. Then impact. Pain lanced through her body as she hit something solid. She lay there gasping, every breath agony as her eyes struggled to adjust to bright sunlight. Sunlight? Eleanor blinked, vision clearing slowly. Above her was open sky, a brilliant blue expanse unmarred by clouds. She was lying on grass, the scent of it sharp in her nostrils. Gingerly, she pushed herself up to a sitting position, wincing at the pain in her ribs. She was in a clearing surrounded by dense forest. The trees were familiar, oaks, maples, pines, but they grew with a wild abundance she'd never seen before. In the air, Eleanor took a careful breath. It was so clean it almost hurt her lungs, carrying none of the subtle chemical traces that permeated even the freshest air in her world. She was on the other side. Somehow, she had fallen through the breach. Eleanor reached for her comm unit, but it was gone, probably lost in the fall. She patted her pockets and found her phone instead. No signal, of course, but it was intact. She switched it to camera mode and slowly turned in a circle, recording her surroundings that in the distance, she could make out the silhouette of what might be mountains. She was standing in what should have been the greater Boston area, but there was no sign of the city, just endless wilderness. Okay, Eleanor, she said aloud, her voice sounding small in the vast silence. You are a scientist. Think. The breach had remained open even after the power was cut. That suggested it had somehow become self-sustaining. A terrifying possibility with implications she couldn't even begin to calculate. But it also meant there might still be a way back. She just had to find it. Eleanor checked the position of the sun. It appeared to be mid-afternoon. She looked down at herself. Jeans, sneakers, a light sweater over a t-shirt. Not ideal for wilderness survival, but she'd have to make do. Her scientific mind was already cataloging differences in this world. The vegetation seemed somehow more vibrant, the colors more intense. She bent to examine a cluster of wildflowers, noting subtle variations from species she recognized. Different evolutionary paths, perhaps In a world without human influence, that a sound from the forest edge made her freeze. Something was moving through the underbrush, something large. Eleanor's heart rate spiked as she realized her vulnerable position. In a world without humans, what apex predators might have thrived unchecked. She backed away slowly, looking around for anything she might use as a weapon. The crackling of branches grew louder. Eleanor picked up a fallen branch, holding it like a baseball bat. Whatever was coming, she wouldn't go down without a fight. The foliage parted, and Eleanor found herself face to face with herself, or rather, a woman who looked exactly like her. Same height, same features, same dark hair. But this other Eleanor was dressed in what appeared to be animal skins, her hair longer and wilder, her skin deeply tanned. And she carried a spear tipped with what looked like worked flint. The two women stared at each other in mutual shock. Then the other Eleanor spoke, not in English, but in sounds that were unmistakably language, complex and structured. She gestured with her free hand at Eleanor, then at herself, her expression a mixture of fear and wonder. "I don't understand," Eleanor said, lowering her branch slightly. "Do you speak English? Español? Français?" The other woman's eyes widened at the sound of Eleanor's voice. She took a step closer, peering intently at Eleanor's face, then reaching out to touch the fabric of her sweater. She spoke again, this time more urgently, pointing back the way she had come. "You want me to go with you?" Eleanor asked, miming walking. The other woman nodded vigorously, then made a series of gestures that seemed to indicate danger or urgency. "Okay," Eleanor said, making a decision. "Lead the way." As they set off into the forest, Eleanor's mind raced. A parallel Earth where humans never evolved. Yet here was someone identical to her. Not just similar, identical. This wasn't just another universe. It was something far more complex. A branch reality, perhaps, that had diverged from her own at some critical juncture. And that meant the breach wasn't just a danger to her world. It potentially threatened the entire multiverse. Eleanor followed her doppelgänger through the dense forest, struggling to keep pace. The other woman moved with the confident grace of someone intimately familiar with this environment, barely making a sound as she navigated the underbrush. In contrast, Eleanor felt clumsy and conspicuous, her shoes catching on roots and her breathing embarrassingly loud. They had been traveling for about 20 minutes when the other woman, Eleanor had mentally dubbed her Ella to avoid confusion, held up a hand in a clear signal to stop. She crouched, motioning for Eleanor to do the same. Through the trees ahead, Eleanor could make out a small clearing and what appeared to be crude structures. Huts made of branches, animal hides, and what might have been clay. Smoke rose from a central fire pit. People moved about the encampment, dressed similarly to Ella in animal skins and rough-woven textiles. "You're home," Eleanor whispered, pointing. Ella nodded, but her expression remained tense. She made a wide gesture with her arms, followed by a crushing motion with her hands, then pointed to the sky. "The breach," Eleanor guessed. "You know about it." Another nod. Ella pointed to Eleanor, made the same crushing gesture, then pointed to herself and the encampment. "You think I caused this? I'm a danger to you?" Eleanor frowned. Ella considered for a moment, then shook her head. She repeated the gesture sequence, but added new elements, pointing to Eleanor, then herself, then making a motion like things coming together. "We are connected somehow, and the breach is affecting both our worlds." This time, Ella smiled, a brief flash of recognition, and touched her temple, as if to say, "You understand." They continued toward the encampment. As they emerged from the tree line, several people turned to look. There were perhaps 30 individuals visible, men and women of various ages, all engaged in different tasks, preparing food, working with animal hides, crafting tools. All activity ceased as they caught sight of Eleanor. A murmur ran through the group. An older man stepped forward, saying something to Ella in their shared language. He was stout and weathered, with gray streaking his dark beard, and he carried himself with the authority of a leader. Ella responded rapidly, gesturing repeatedly between herself and Eleanor. The man's eyes widened as he studied Eleanor's face, then narrowed as he took in her strange clothing. He barked orders, and several younger men moved to surround them, holding spears. "Wait," Eleanor said, raising her hands to show they were empty. "I'm not a threat." The older man approached her cautiously. He reached out and touched the sleeve of her sweater, rubbing the fabric between his fingers with evident fascination. He spoke again, this time directly to Eleanor. "I don't understand your language," she said, "but I need your help. I need to get back to where I came from." Understanding dawned in the man's eyes, not of her words, but of the situation. He turned and called out, and from one of the larger huts emerged a stooped figure leaning on a staff. The newcomer was an elderly woman, her face a network of deep wrinkles, her white hair bound in complex braids adorned with small bones and colorful stones. As she approached, the crowd parted respectfully. She stopped before Eleanor, peering up at her with sharp, intelligent eyes. After a long moment, the old woman rapped her staff on the ground and spoke, a single word that sounded like a command. Immediately, the armed men lowered their spears. She gestured for Eleanor to follow her and headed toward the large hut. Ella touched Eleanor's arm and nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor followed the old woman. The interior of the hut was dim, lit only by a small fire pit in the center. The smoke escaped through a hole in the roof. Around the walls hung various objects, bundles of dried plants, animal skins, strange artifacts made of bone and stone. The old woman seated herself on a mat beside the fire and motioned for Eleanor to sit opposite her. Ella entered behind them and sat to one side, watching intently. The old woman studied Eleanor's face in the flickering firelight, then reached into a pouch at her waist and withdrew a handful of small objects, polished stones, bones, seeds. She cast them on the ground between them, studying how they fell with a frown of concentration. She spoke a few words that sounded like questions. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said. "I don't understand." The old woman sighed, then did something unexpected. She reached out and placed her palm against Eleanor's forehead. Her hand was surprisingly warm, that a sensation like static electricity ran through Eleanor's body. The hut seemed to fade around her, replaced by a whirl of images, stars, planets, swirling nebulae. She felt as if she were falling through space. Then new images, a primitive man crafting a spear, a woman giving birth, children playing, an old man dying. Generations passing in seconds. Evolution, civilization, technology. Va, destruction, rebirth. History, human history, compressed into a torrential stream of consciousness. And then, abruptly, clarity. The old woman's voice in her mind. "You understand now?" "Yes," Eleanor thought, stunned. "How is this possible?" "We call it the knowing. Few have the gift. You are communicating directly with my mind. Your kind would call it telepathy." Crude word for something so complex. The old woman, her name was Mara, Eleanor somehow knew, removed her hand. The connection broke, but a residual understanding remained, like the afterimage from staring at a bright light. "You are human," Eleanor said aloud, the realization settling over her. "You are all human." Ella nodded, understanding her words now. "Yes, but not like you. We followed. Different path." Her speech was halting, as if she were translating in her head, but the words were recognizably English. "This isn't a world where humans never existed," Eleanor said slowly. "It's a world where humans evolved differently, where civilization, as I know it, never developed. The people have always lived with the land, not against it," Ella explained. "We take only what we need. We listen to the spirits of forest, river, sky. We do not build great stone villages or cut down forests or dig deep into earth." Eleanor looked around the hut with new understanding. This wasn't a primitive society. It was an alternative path of human development, one that had prioritized harmony with the natural world over dominion and technological advancement. "But you are me," she said to Ella. "How is that possible?" Mara spoke, her voice dry and cracked with age. "All worlds connected. All lives echoed. You are Ella in your world. She is you in ours. When worlds touch." She made a rippling motion with her hands. "The breach is connecting our realities," Eleanor said. "That's why the accelerator shutdown didn't close it. It's become self-sustaining because it's linking parallel versions of the same individuals." Ella nodded. 3 days ago, the sky tore open. Strange things came through. Metal birds, creatures of light. Some of our hunters disappeared when they went to investigate. "My colleagues must be searching for me," Eleanor said. "They might have sent drones, unmanned flying machines, to locate me. They did not find you," Mara said grimly. "But others did." "Others? What do you mean?" Ella and Mara exchanged a look. "Other beings," Ella said finally. "Not the people. Not human. They came through the tear after you arrived. They hunt now in our forest." A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. "What kind of beings?" "We have no word for them," Ella said. "They walk like men, but do not look like men. Their skin shines like water under moon. They carry weapons of light and speak with voices like thunder." "Aliens?" Eleanor thought wildly. Or perhaps humans so technologically advanced they were unrecognizable from yet another branch of reality? The breach must be growing, connecting multiple universes, multiple timelines. "How many?" she asked. "We have seen 6, Ella replied. "They set up camp near the Great Tear. They have machines that dig into the earth." "Show me," Eleanor demanded, standing up. "I need to see exactly what they are doing." Mara shook her head. "Night comes soon. Not safe to travel in dark. You will see tomorrow." Eleanor wanted to protest, but she knew the old woman was right. She had no equipment, no weapons, and no knowledge of this environment. Stumbling around in the dark would be suicide. "Fine," she conceded, "but first thing in the morning." Ella nodded. "You stay with my family tonight. We have food, place to sleep." As they left the hut, Eleanor noticed the sky had indeed darkened. The camp was lit by several fires now, and the smell of cooking meat filled the air. Despite the tension of her situation, Eleanor realized she was ravenously hungry. Ella led her to a smaller hut where a young man was tending a cook fire. He looked up as they approached, his expression changing from welcoming to shock as he saw Eleanor. "This is Coda," Ella said. "My mate." Coda recovered quickly, offering a cautious greeting before returning to his cooking. Inside the hut, 2 young children played with small carved wooden animals. They looked up at Eleanor with wide, curious eyes. "Nika and Tav," Ella introduced them. "My children." The domesticity of the scene struck Eleanor forcefully. This woman wasn't just her doppelganger. She had a life, a family, a place in her community. And Eleanor's arrival threatened all of it. They shared a meal of roasted meat and wild roots. The food was simple but surprisingly flavorful, seasoned with herbs Eleanor didn't recognize. The children eventually overcame their shyness and inundated her with questions that Ella translated, mostly about her strange clothes and where she came from. As night fully descended, Ella showed Eleanor to a sleeping mat in a corner of the hut. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her as the adrenaline of the day ebbed away. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was of Theo and Amara. Were they safe? Were they looking for her? Or had the breach consumed them too? She dreamed of falling endlessly through darkness, universes blooming and dying around her like flowers. Eleanor woke to Ella's hand on her shoulder. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten with dawn. "We go now," Ella whispered, while others still sleep. Eleanor sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. She hadn't slept on the ground since a camping trip in graduate school, and her body was protesting vigorously. "Mara doesn't know we are going?" she asked quietly. Ella shook her head. "She would forbid it. But you must see. You must understand." They slipped out of the camp as the first birds began to sing. Ella carried a bow and a quiver of arrows, as well as a small pack containing what looked like dried food and a water skin. She handed Eleanor a sturdy walking stick and a cloak made of some kind of fur. "To hide your strange clothes," she explained, "and for warmth. The morning is cold." They set off at a brisk pace. Eleanor struggled to keep up, her muscles complaining and her breath coming in short gasps. She was in reasonably good shape. She went to the gym 3 times a week and ran occasionally. But Ella moved with the stamina of someone who had spent her entire life traveling through wilderness. "How far?" Eleanor panted after about an hour. "Not far now," Ella replied. "Over that ridge." They climbed a steep, wooded hill. As they neared the top, Ella motioned for silence and dropped to a crouch. Eleanor followed suit, moving carefully to avoid stepping on dry branches and to the crest of a ridge. They lay flat on their stomachs and looked down into the valley below. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The breach was there, a massive tear in reality that hung in the air like a jagged wound, perhaps 100 feet across. Through it, Eleanor could see distorted glimpses of what looked like her lab, or what was left of it. Equipment lay scattered and broken, and part of the ceiling had collapsed. But what truly shocked her was what had been built around the breach. A complex of sleek, metallic structures surrounded it, temporary buildings of a design she'd never seen before, connected by covered walkways. Strange vehicles moved between them, hovering slightly above the ground rather than rolling on wheels. And around it all was a perimeter of glowing energy, a fence or a force field of some kind. Moving among the structures were the beings Ella had described. They were roughly humanoid, but taller and more slender than humans, with skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. They wore close-fitting garments that might have been armor or environmental suits. "What are they doing?" Eleanor whispered. Ella pointed to one side of the complex where several of the beings operated what looked like a drilling apparatus. The machine bored into the ground with a high-pitched whine they could hear even at this distance. "They dig," Ella said simply, "day and night. And they take samples of everything: plants, animals, water, soil. They have killed 3 of our hunters who came too close." Eleanor studied the scene, her scientific mind racing to make sense of it. These beings had the technology to travel between universes, or at least to take advantage of breaches like the one her team had accidentally created. They were clearly advanced far beyond human capability. But what did they want? The answer came in a flash of intuition. "Resources," she murmured. "They're assessing this world's resources." "What do you mean?" Ella asked. "Your world is pristine," Eleanor explained. "No pollution, no depletion of natural resources. My world, the world I come from, we have damaged it terribly in the name of progress. We have cut down forests, drained wetlands, built cities of concrete and steel. We have burned fossil fuels that have changed our climate. We have poisoned our rivers and oceans with chemicals." Understanding dawned in Ella's eyes. "They want to take what we have preserved. Not just take it," Eleanor said grimly. "Exploit it. Colonize it. Your world is what we call virgin territory. Untapped wealth for the taking. We must stop them," Ella said with unexpected fierceness. Eleanor looked at her sharply. "How?" "Your people have bows and spears. These beings have technology beyond anything even my world has developed. But you understand their machines," Ella countered. "You are what is your word? Scientist. You created the tear. By accident," Eleanor protested. "And I don't know how to close it. I don't understand their technology any more than you do." But even as she said it, Eleanor was studying the aliens' equipment with a critical eye. There was something familiar about the configuration of their machinery around the breach. It reminded her of the containment field her team had built, but far more advanced. "I might be able to disrupt whatever they are using to stabilize the breach," she said slowly, "if I can get close enough. But it would be incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than letting them take our world." Ella asked quietly. Eleanor had no answer for that. She continued to observe the aliens' operation, noting the patrol patterns of what appeared to be security personnel and the layout of their complex. There, she said eventually, pointing to a smaller structure at the edge of the complex. That looks like a power generation facility. If we could disable it, their security systems might fail long enough for me to access their main equipment. Ella raised an eyebrow. I can't do this alone, Eleanor admitted. I need your help. You know this terrain, how to move silently, how to avoid being detected. Ella was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. The people have been guardians of this land since the first dawn. I will not fail that trust now. They retreated from the ridge to plan. Eleanor used a stick to draw a rough map of the alien complex in the dirt, marking the locations of the power facility, the main equipment around the breach, and the security perimeter. We need a diversion, she explained. Something to draw their attention away from the power facility. Fire, Ella suggested. The forest of the west is dry from lack of rain. It would burn quickly. Eleanor frowned. I don't want to damage the ecosystem. A small, controlled fire, Ella clarified. The rain will come soon. The clouds gather already. It will not spread far. It was the best option they had. They spent the afternoon gathering materials and preparing. Ella constructed several small bundles of dry kindling and resinous pine needles that would ignite quickly and produce a lot of smoke. Eleanor, meanwhile, examined the few technological items she had with her. Her phone was useless as a communication device, but its other functions still worked. The camera could help her document the alien technology, and the flashlight might come in handy. She also had a small multi-tool in her pocket that included a knife, screwdriver, and pliers. Basic, but better than nothing. As the sun began to set, they made their final preparations. The aliens' complex was brightly lit, making a night approach both easier to conceal and more dangerous if they were spotted. We should wait for full darkness, Ella said. The moon will not rise until late tonight. They shared a meager meal of dried meat and berries from Ella's pack. As they ate, Eleanor found herself studying her doppelgänger's face. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Are you happy with your life here? Ella considered the question thoughtfully. I do not know if happy is the right word. I am fulfilled. I have purpose. I care for my family, my people. I live in harmony with the world around me. She paused. Are you happy in your world of machines? I thought I was, Eleanor replied. I have dedicated my life to science, to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. I have made discoveries, written papers, earned accolades from my peers. But I don't have a family. I barely have friends outside of work. I can't remember the last time I just sat in nature and listened to the birds. Perhaps both our paths have wisdom to offer, Ella suggested, and flaws to overcome. Eleanor nodded, a strange sense of peace settling over her despite the danger that lay ahead. Perhaps. Darkness fell completely. They made their way carefully down the ridge toward the alien complex, using natural cover and moving only when the roving security patrols were facing away. When they reached the edge of the cleared area surrounding the complex, they separated. Ella headed west to set the diversionary fires, while Eleanor found a hiding place with a clear view of the power facility. They had agreed on a simple signal. When Eleanor saw the fire start, she would count to 100, giving the aliens time to respond to the threat before making her move. Time stretched endlessly as Eleanor waited, crouched in the underbrush. Then, finally, a flash of orange light in the western forest. Smoke began to rise, visible even in the darkness. An alarm sounded from within the complex. Eleanor began to count.